Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA, and we're joined, as you are usually every month, by Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania, who's with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
I'm doing well, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. Where do we start? My gosh, so much has happened since last I talked to you, but I guess we want to start right away with ISIS coming out of the gate, and the idea that we're involved now once again with ISIS, not only in Iraq but now in Syria in terms of our air bombing. Are we doing enough there? Is the president doing the right things right now? I know we kind of came to it a little bit late. A lot of people could talk about that, and you can as well. But are we doing enough right now?
Well, Gary, that's a very fair question, and here's what's difficult about it. Bombing various ISIS assets is certainly necessary. In my view, first of all, this is a very, very dangerous organization. This is the same exact ideology, philosophy, religious extremism mentality of Al-Qaeda. Every bit is the same intent to do as much harm to Americans as possible. Difference is much more capability, right? This is not just a band of terrorists. This is an army that occupies land, that has a government, and they have their own finance minister. They have, this is very serious, and we can't allow them to continue to grow and strengthen. They will certainly be a launching pad for attacks on the West and us if we were to allow that. So is it right to attack them and to push back? Yes. Is it adequate? That's a tough question, and here's why. You can't solve this problem without somebody's troops being on the ground.
Right.
Now, my hope is that'll be the Sunni Arab states and the Turks, the people in the neighborhood who have an enormous amount at stake and who also want to see ISIS defeated. But to convince them to provide the troops to get this job finished is going to require a real demonstration of American resolve and leadership. And that's a big question. Given all that, really the lack of leadership from this administration, will they be able to persuade these countries to provide the troops that will be necessary to secure the ground? I think that's yet to be seen.
Here's the problem that we have. We jump into situations. Obviously, Iraq was ours. We didn't leave a force there. I see Leon Panetta now in his upcoming book said we should have left a force there.
Right.
We look at that whole thing and we say, okay, it seems like every time there's something comes up, we say we don't want to be the world's policeman, yet we always are the first ones to lead the charge in. And I've always been a great believer, if not America, then who? But right now there are a lot of people asking, who else should be stepping up? Now, we're seeing England and France step up in the last few weeks and helping with the bombing. We see 5 Arab states that are helping with the bombings right now, and yet many are loath to step in there and do anything on the ground themselves. We do see Kurdish forces from the north helping, and yet at the same time, we've seen Iraqi forces outside of the area of Baghdad who have turned and run or even switched sides occasionally. So we've got a real mess right here in terms of deciding, okay, if these people don't have the passion to fight, do we have to take the passion once again and put our people out in front of all this and defeat these people because the president has said we're going to degrade and defeat ISIS?
Yeah, well, it wasn't ancient history. I mean, George W. Bush assembled a huge coalition of many, many countries that contributed troops, forces that put on the ground, were in harm's way, sustained casualties, because there was a strong, united coalition that recognized that American leadership was not going to waver, was going to see this through. You made a very important point, I think, Gary. We should have left behind the residual force that we've done everywhere else. I mean, look, we still have people on the ground in Korea and Japan and Germany.
And Europe.
Right. And they're not dying. They're not coming under attack. And frankly, those countries have long been secure. But it's because once we secured them, we didn't abandon them. And so the President Obama's decision that we had to evacuate completely, that left the Iraqi army in a position where they did not yet have the strength, the cohesion, the sophistication, the training, the air support to successfully resist ISIS. And it was a huge mistake, and it's contributed to the situation we're in.
I wanted to ask you a question from the standpoint of, and I'm so tired of hearing the word boots on the ground. I did see a terrible cartoon the other day where someone sent this to me, and they had 2 soldiers putting on a pair of golf shoes. And it said, hey, I thought we weren't supposed to have boots on the ground. He said, that's right, I'm putting golf shoes on. We'll put those on the ground. So the idea is that we're eventually going to be there in some way, shape, or form. We've got so-called what do they call them, observers right now or whatever on the ground, but we are advisors, I guess. And every time we say the word advisors, what we really mean by that, and a friend of mine who was in special ops told me yesterday, that's special forces. He said they're on the ground right now providing targets. So we have people on the ground, and despite the verbal gymnastics that we continue to hear all over Washington, we have people there. Now, the question is, the president is very careful to stay away from the word war. And yet, when you're dropping bombs on people, killing people, wiping stuff out, I would dare say they would probably think it's a war. I also understand that the only ones that can declare war are Congress. And so is Congress doing enough right now from your standpoint to get involved with this? Or are they letting the president kind of shoulder this by himself with maybe just giving him a little bit of money along the way?
So here, you've raised a big and interesting question. And the heart of this is, what is the extent of the president's authority as commander-in-chief? And when does Congress have to come in and give him the authority,
exactly,
specific authority? I think you can make a strong case, and I've been sympathetic to the case, that the president has pretty broad latitude under his powers as commander-in-chief. Every president has claimed that authority, has exercised that authority in the past. But here's the big thing. This is going to be a long and difficult battle to truly defeat ISIS and eliminate this threat. The president knows that. It would have been wise, even if he didn't need it legally, it would have been wise for him to come to Congress and ask for an authorization for the use of military force, as George Bush did, as George H.W. Bush did. You don't have to have the argument about whether it's technically, legally necessary in order to recognize that it is politically valuable to the president to secure broad support for a mission. And frankly, it forces the president to define that mission, to answer questions about that mission, some of the questions you've asked, like, how are we going to do this if we don't put our troops on the ground? And don't we already have some troops on the ground? Where do we draw a line there? Who is going to provide the troops? What happens without a large-scale number of troops? What happens if Americans are captured or shot down? Or there's important questions that really haven't been resolved. This is part of why a request from the president for an authorization of the use of military force would have been very helpful. A constructive debate. There would have been a vote, probably overwhelmingly, to support this effort. But the president didn't want to do that, and I fear it's because I know there were some Democratic senators who didn't want to have to cast that vote. So that puts politics, in my view, ahead of a very important national security issue.
We're talking with Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania here this morning. You know what really, I guess, bothers me a lot about all this is the president has said many, many times, and I agree with him on this, that America works better when Congress and the president work together. And I think Americans have a much better feeling when their representatives in the Congress, in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, are out there voicing some of the concerns that we have, but they didn't get that chance. And the fact that the president used as his reasoning for going in, ironically, the very same thing that George Bush used to attack al-Qaeda, I found to be somewhat ironic. This is a different time, a different situation, though it's still terrorism. But one of the points you made in the beginning, I think it's very important. I also think it's very true, that this is a group that's calling themselves an Islamic State. They are a group that it has some of the trappings of states. Do you see a time where Congress would say, we are declaring war on ISIS? When President Bush declared war on terror, I thought it was going to be a tough one for him, and it ended up being a tough one for him because terror is a concept. But now you have a specific group that is coming together. While they don't necessarily have borders as a country, and while they do hide among civilians, they are a specific group. Does that make any difference?
I think it does, and I think that this is something that, as I say, we should have had this debate, we should have had this vote, but President Obama, didn't want to have this debate. Senator Reid definitely didn't want to have this debate, so he shut down the Senate and sent everybody home. So I think this is not the right way to go into a battle of this scale.
Yeah, 1-800-357-0910, by the way, if you'd like to make a call and talk to Senator Toomey here for a moment. The one thing that I heard over the weekend, and I heard Senator Ayotte over the weekend say, this is political. It's taking precedence. The November elections are taking precedence here over what we should be doing that's right. It sounded like you were very close to agreeing with her a moment ago. Do you agree with her?
Well, it certainly looks that way. I know that there are Democratic senators in very tough re-election races. The political base of their party wants nothing to do with this and would want them to vote no. most Americans see this as a very dangerous threat and would want them to support it. And so that puts them in a dilemma. And unfortunately, sometimes when politicians are faced with a dilemma that requires some leadership, instead they want to get out of town. And it looks like that's what's happened. And it's hard to believe it's a coincidence that it happens, just weeks before a major election.
Senator Toomey, we got a call here from Bob. Want to get that in very quickly. Bob, go ahead. Your turn to make the call.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Bob.
The one thing, Senator, that really has me concerned, and I don't think that I'm completely different from a lot of people, is the fact that we got lied into a war in Iraq. There were no weapons of mass destruction-related activities. We spent trillions of dollars overseas in the Mideast. We were lied into that. It was false. And the military machine continues to generate enemies. The more we bomb, the more we create the foment through our military actions, the more we guarantee that our military has a job ahead of it. We don't seek, actually, pacification. We don't seek cooperation. We seek military solutions.
Bob,
I'm tired of the militarism.
Yeah.
Let me get a reaction to that, Bob. Go ahead, Senator.
Yeah, well, I have to disagree on several counts. First of all, we weren't lied into Iraq. There was an intelligence failing. I will grant that, but it was the entire Western world was convinced. Our allies in England and France, everyone was convinced that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein had, in fact, used weapons of mass destruction, and he absolutely refused to indicate that in any way that he had abandoned those weapons. So we had every plausible reason to believe that there were weapons of mass destruction. And when we got there, it turned out that stockpile was mostly gone. But that's not to say that was based on a lie. I also would suggest that, it's not because of the U.S. military that we have this problem from these terrorists. We weren't bombing. It wasn't American bombs that caused Osama bin Laden to decide to take down the World Trade Towers and attack the Pentagon and Washington. They decided that on their own prior to any American military activity. So I just don't accept this idea that it's all our fault. I think these people harbor an abiding hatred for our form of government, our system, the Western world itself, and they've just declared themselves our enemies. I'm in favor of using peaceful resolution wherever that's possible. But sometimes some of these people will only understand force.
Senator, let me get Mike in York in here with you very quickly, too, who's been listening. Mike, you're on the Gary Sutton Show with Senator Pat Toomey. Go ahead, Mike. Your turn to make the call.
Good morning, Senator. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning.
Senator, I'm calling about the Secret Service. That woman, I don't know her name, Pearson, I think it is.
Yeah.
She testified before Congress. I think it was the House. But still, she perjured herself. Is there any doubt that she perjured herself?
All right, Mike, thank you.
I'm not sure exactly. I didn't, that was a House hearing. I certainly wasn't there. I haven't seen the transcript, so I'm not sure how exactly she perjured herself.
I'm not sure either, but the Secret Service is certainly, one of those topics that's out there right now, Senator. Obviously, we want the president kept safe. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be right back with you. We'll get a few more thoughts from Senator Pat Toomey here before we leave, here on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA with Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania. Senator, very quickly on the Secret Service, obviously people concerned. We saw what happened at the CDC about 3 weeks ago, and the president's in an elevator with a ex-con carrying a gun, an arm away from the president. We saw the guy jump the fence at the White House, get to the bottom of the steps in the East Room. And what's interesting about all that, and I might be straying a bit over the line here, but I said, when you look at the security in the United States right now, you look at Ebola coming into the country, you look at illegal immigration, you look at that person running across the lawn into the White House, one has to sit back and say, have we become an incompetent nation in terms of what we're doing right now when government is out there trying to do everything and not doing it very well?
Well, look, government
maybe some in substance and some at least in the look of it.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, I think. I mean, there's a lot that the government does very badly, frankly. It's one of the reasons we conservatives have long argued that we should keep the government as small as possible. And it's not because, people suddenly get stupid when they go to work for the government, but it's because you don't have the dynamic that forces excellence. The private sector You have to do a great job at what you do every day, or someone else takes your customer. Gary, if you don't have a good radio show, people will tune into something else, right? It's and so competition forces everybody in the private sector to continuously improve on the quality of service, the price that they can provide, whatever it is. Government is immune to that. There's no competition, and so it's not surprising that the competence suffers. Look, the Secret Service thing is very disturbing at several levels, not the least of which is the message that was coming out of the Secret Service after the guy was finally apprehended after getting way too far into the White House. They send out a statement praising the restraint shown by Secret Service agents.
Yeah.
Guess what? I'm not looking for restraint from the Secret Service agent when an armed guy is charging at the White House. That's not the moment for restraint. That's the moment you use all force necessary to prevent an intruder.
When you're guarding the president, you're not out collecting for the Red Cross. I'm sorry.
No, it's so it makes you worry that somebody at very high levels is confused about the mission, and that's why this change was necessary.
You mentioned a moment ago about Republicans saying they want to keep less government out of your life, more money in your pocket, and all that. That is a conservative point of view. And yet, do you feel right now, there are a lot of people in this country, as you well know, and you look at the polls for Congress, look at the polls for the president, who don't like government very much right now, Republican or Democrat alike, and I know you're very aware of that. But my point is conservatism showing through with Republicans right now? Many would say Republicans, and you hear the word about the establishment Republicans and so forth, but it has become kind of a status quo where conservatism isn't getting a chance to show through in all its glory and really go out there and say, yeah, here's the way we're giving money back to you. Has Congress become part of just the whole guard the status quo mentality that many people are seeing in this country?
No, I don't think so, Gary. I think what's going on is a little bit different. I think this is the most conservative Republican House and most conservative Republican Senate. I mean, the Republican caucus in each of these two bodies is what I'm referring to. It's the most conservative that in my lifetime. The problem is we're not in control. Republicans control one out of the three branches of the elected government, just the House, not the Senate, not the White House. So, unfortunately, from our point of view and our political system, controlling one out of the three, you really don't get to set the agenda and set policy.
And you and I have talked about that before, but I would say this. The Democrats obviously have the mainstream media on their side. We understand that part. Okay? Now, realistically, and I said this to you before, and I wonder, and you may disagree with me on this, but I wonder where the Republicans are, and conservatives particularly, are in going out there and pounding that message every day and making sure that they're out there every day in places where people are seeing it and saying, we got a message. I mean, it seems to me that if we battered at the door a little bit, if those people battered at the door a little bit, that message might be a little bit louder. Am I wrong on that?
Well, I'm sure that there is I'm sure many of us, myself included, could refine our message delivery and could, to find a better way to deliver the message. But many of us are trying, Gary.
Yeah.
And
I'm not doubting that. I'm not doubting that part.
No, I understand. But I'm doing shows like yours almost every day of the week, doing op-eds in newspapers across the Commonwealth and across the country. Getting on TV when the opportunity makes sense, and delivering a message that is all about the various ways in which a conservative worldview leads to a better life, more prosperity, more opportunity, a higher standard of living, more freedom. So, could we be doing more? Yeah, I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's right. But it's an ongoing process.
Right. Final question, or final comment here. We're watching this whole Ebola thing taking place.
Right.
We saw the president send 3,000 soldiers overseas to West Africa. We understand as of this week there are yet no hospitals built. I guess they're in the process of assessing what's going on in the zone there. We see the first person come to our country. It's being held in quarantine right now in Dallas, along with a lot of other people that are being checked. Your thoughts on the whole Ebola scare that's going on right now?
Well, look, this is a very, very concerning development, right? We also had to add to that litany the first case outside of West Africa where the disease was transmitted to another person, and it happened in Spain. So I think we need to devote whatever resources it takes to keep this bottled up where it is. This is a very, very dangerous, very, very hostile and aggressive virus. it was a very high fatality rate. So it's really important that we keep it bottled up in the rural places where it is. If this gets into big cities, even big cities in Africa, it's going to end up spreading to other cities, and that's going to be very, very problematic. Now, we've got there's no comparison between the kind of healthcare system that we have in this country versus what they have there. So we're much, much better able to cope. But, hey, I don't want to challenge our healthcare system with an outbreak of Ebola. I don't think it's coming, but I think we should be erring on the side of caution. I think we should be. I think we should have some serious restrictions on people coming from that part of the world and coming into the United States. Let's get this under control. Let's keep this bottled up. Let's provide. That means we're going to have to provide some resources in the afflicted areas, and I think we should do that. It's the right thing to do for America and for the world.
Senator Pat Toomey, thanks so much for joining us this morning here on the Gary Sutton Show. Always a pleasure to have you here, sir.
Gary, thanks for having me.